Hello, today I'll be talking about vulnerability, the power of vulnerability, and how being authentic can strengthen your connections. Now, have you ever felt the pressure to hide your true feelings, to be someone you're not, or to be, and this is nothing against stoicism, but to be stoic? Well, in a world that often values perfection, embracing vulnerability can feel like a risk, but it is one of the most powerful things that you can do to justify your existence as a human being. Now, let's explore what's vulnerability and what being vulnerable means. Now, what is vulnerability? I would have used my dictionary, but the definitions in my dictionary are just too bogus. But let's try again. Now, I have this theory of psychology, but I wouldn't bore you that. I wouldn't bore you with that right now in this video. I'll talk about it in some other video. Okay. Now, according to Oxford, vulnerable, one adjective that may be hurt, wounded, or injured, unprotected, exposed to danger, attack, or criticism, having won a game towards a robber at contract breach and therefore liable to higher penalties. Vulnerability, according to Oxford. So I'll take that again. Vulnerable, adjective that may be hurt, wounded, or injured, unprotected, exposed to danger, attack, or criticism. So, according to Oxford, being vulnerable is you being exposed, being unprotected, or being attacked, being open to criticism. Now, according to Longman, starts with the adjective capable of being physically or mentally wounded, open to attack or damage, vulnerableness, vulnerability. So the adjective, the adverb, and the noun. So according to these guys, being vulnerable is the ability for you to be able to expose yourself to harm. Simply put. Now, would you consider that as a good thing? Because think about it, being vulnerable is me as a person leaving myself open to the possibility of harm. Is that a good thing? Well, let's see. Now, it says vulnerability isn't weakness. Society often teaches us to be tough and strong, but vulnerability is actually a strength. It shows courage to expose yourself emotionally. Now, this morning I was reading Art of Seduction by Robert Greene, and then in chapter 1 he was talking about one of the seducer types. According to him, there are 9 seducer types. So I was talking about the child, the natural. Now, the natural seducer types is mainly seen in children, and I was talking about the adult child. So basically, children are, we like children, or children seduce us by them being vulnerable because they just allow themselves to live and be humans. So I was talking about the adult child that retains is our ability to still be a child as an adult. Then, he furthermore now went and spoke about vulnerability in humans and how most people try to close off or close up the emotional part of themselves because they don't want to be hurt. But during the course of this action, because they're trying to not feel pain or feel hurt, they also, in a way, make themselves numb to pleasure. So, because they're trying to protect themselves from feeling negative pains, they unconsciously dull their senses to feeling positive pleasures. Yeah. Now, when you're vulnerable as a person, being vulnerable doesn't mean you won't be hurt, because by definition, vulnerability is you actually exposing yourself to harm. But being vulnerable is you taking a chance and realizing that although you might experience the negative effect of vulnerability, you are also giving yourself the chance and ability to experience the positive effect of vulnerability. Now, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? That is left for you as an individual to decide. How to embrace vulnerability in your life? First, you start small. If vulnerability is an uncharted territory to you, you definitely shouldn't just totally just expose yourself to vulnerability because it is something you are not used to. So start small, learn to trust more, learn to have faith in people, but you start small in tiny doses. You don't just leave yourself open to attack, which, because that is actually not smart, to be honest. But if you do not leave yourself open because you're trying to not feel negativity, you will never be able to feel positivity. And what's the purpose of life when you live as a numb creature? Let go of perfection and realize that as a human being, you can never be perfect. Perfection is a facade, and perfection in itself is an imperfection, because perfection is not something that humans are made to accommodate. Humans can never be perfect, and because of this imperfection, that in itself is beautiful and poetic. You let open to emotional risk. So you leave yourself open to emotional risk. Keyword: risk. You have to realize that when you're leaving yourself to vulnerability, it's not that you won't be hurt. You will, but you're also giving yourself the ability to experience positivity. So, in as much as when you leave yourself open to vulnerability, you can feel pain, disdain, hurt, harm. You can also feel love, pleasure, happiness, joy, kindness, because they all come hand in hand. It's like two sides to a coin. It's yin and yang effect. Without this, there can never be this, or without this, there can never be this. So if you choose to not feel this, you will never feel this. But if you choose to feel this, then you feel this. Practice self-compassion. Now, you have to be kind to yourself. When you open up, it is normal to feel exposed, but that's where growth happens. Also, back to letting go of perfection, you have to understand that it is okay to not have it all together. Nobody does. It's okay to not be perfect. Nobody is perfect. Now, step 4, the power of vulnerability and personal growth. How does vulnerability help in personal growth? 1, embracing your imperfection and realizing that you're just human, accepting your flaws, and understanding that failure helps you to be a better person. Vulnerability leads to healing. When you're vulnerable, you are able to talk about your struggles, you're able to feel your emotions deeply. And when you feel your emotions deeply, this helps you to justify your existence as a human being. Now, growth happens outside your comfort zone. In one of my videos, I spoke about the growth mindset and how you cannot grow in your comfort zone. Growth happens outside your comfort zone. So, if vulnerability is something you're not used to, it's fine. That is just an imperfect side of you, which is a beautiful side of you. So, how do you start? You start by embracing this part of you and realizing that you are wholly human after all, and it's not such a bad thing for you to try and protect yourself. But in as much as you are protecting yourself, you are also denying yourself. So you're protecting yourself, but you're denying yourself. So this is where your own personal conviction comes in. As an individual, what do you want? Now, step 5, vulnerability in leadership and success. Leaders who are vulnerable have the ability to inspire others. Vulnerability encourages innovation, and embracing vulnerability in itself is success. Let's start. Leaders who are vulnerable inspires others. Well, I think I listened to a lot of Robert Greene. So Robert Greene was talking about how one of our UK's first Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, as a way of connecting with the masses, and this is done by him being vulnerable with people. So when he's in, it was a prime minister, so I'm guessing House of Lords, or when he's in where they meet, when he's attacked, he doesn't shun down the person or become closed or become defensive. No, he allows himself to listen to what the person is saying, then becomes vulnerable, and then reacts accordingly to what comes his way. So leaders who are vulnerable are able to share the experience of the masses. Also, he spoke about JFK and when, and this might not be an accurate representation, but JFK and some invasion into some other country or some war was being fought, then they lost, and rather than trying to be all high and mighty, he was vulnerable, and because of his vulnerability, the masses were able to sympathize with him. So, vulnerability as a leader helps you to share in the struggles of humanity and the people that you are leading. Now, vulnerability encourages innovation. In business and creativity or in creative fields, when you're vulnerable, you are able to take more risk because vulnerability in itself is a form of risk. And when you're able to take more risk, you're able to think outside the box. You're able to listen to other people's opinions and ideas, and you're able to do these things and still embrace failure without allowing it to make you feel a certain way or make you feel like an actual failure, because your vulnerability in itself allows you to embrace change. Now, embracing vulnerability in success, you're not defined by your achievements alone, but you're also defined by your failures. Because, like I said, the more you fail, the closer you are to achieving success. Now, the most successful people often embrace their vulnerability as a source of strength, not weakness. Well, in conclusion, I wouldn't know if I've been vulnerable, if I've not been vulnerable, because I think I grew up in a very sentimental environment. I think being an African or being a Nigerian or streamlining it to personal experience and saying being who I am, I've been a very vulnerable person growing up, and vulnerability for me is not a faux pas, or it's not something that is so frowned upon. Matter of fact, I think vulnerability is something that just makes you feel alive. Like I said, you will feel pain, but you will feel pleasure. And in feeling those pain, you will realize that there is pleasure in feeling pain, and there is pleasure in the ability to even feel pain in itself. And pain, in a way, is a form of pleasure. I hope I've made any form of sense, and see you in my next video.